Hello, and we are live again. How are you doing today, Brad? It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm doing great.
Thank you so much. I'd like to say a little bit about you so that the audience have a little bit of an idea of your
Okay.
background. So, Brad Dean has spent most of the last decade building mobile apps in React Native, Xamarin, and Maui. He's a senior consultant at Improving, and he lives in Lawrenceville with his wife, son, and way too many dogs. It sounds like we have things in common there because I also love dogs and I happen to love the new device, Vision OS. So I'm super excited about this session. Today, we're going to be speaking about preparing your iPhone and iPad apps for Vision OS. So let's get ready. Are you ready, Brad?
I am ready, and you're going to like this session because it is very dog heavy.
Oh my goodness, that's a bonus. That's amazing. Wow, wow, wow. You're surprising us always. Thank you so much for your presence. And let's begin.
All
Without
right.
further ado, the stage is yours.
All right. Okay. So, like Diane said, I am Brad Dean. I'm a consultant at Improving, um, where I mainly make mobile apps. Here's my contact info if anybody wants to contact me. What we're going to be talking about today is getting iPad and iPhone apps ready for visionOS. And this first version of Vision Pro is a developer kit, but it's still something we need to be looking at. Sometime early 2024, your apps are going to be available here. If you have an app and it's on the App Store, by default, it'll just be available in the visionOS App Store. And this is something that happened before already. When the M1 Max came out and you had iPad and iPhone apps, they were just by default available in the Mac App Store. So if you went and you searched and there weren't immediately results available, then you could see on this little secondary tab iPhone and iPad apps. And, as an example, you see Apollo. It actually really worked out well for them because Reddit redesigned their website and a lot of people didn't like that. And they said, oh, well, just download Apollo for your Mac. They never intended to make a Mac app, but the iPad app worked so well, it just happened to work really well for Mac. So it's the same thing that's happening now. We're going to see the iPad iOS apps. on visionOS, just like we saw them for the M1. When you have an iPad app or an iOS app, you have the concept of a window inside SwiftUI. Everything's inside of a window. On visionOS, we have three different concepts. You have that same window, and then you also have volume, which is the space in three dimensions around that. And then you have what they call full space, which is pretty much volume, but everything is occluded, kind of the difference between AR and VR. What we're going to be talking about in this talk is just the concept of that window. Basically, what you would see if you took an iPad app and just translated it over. So just that two-dimensional app, but in the 3D environment. So to get that window and to move it over, you have three options. You can do nothing and just let your app come over like it will by default. You can opt out and say, I don't want my app to come over. Please don't show it in this app store. Or you can optimize it. And we'll spend a bit of time and we'll actually dig into the code and kind of see, okay, how can I make my app look a little bit better and look more at home using the new visionOS look and feel. So we'll start with do nothing. And this is the easiest because you're done, right? There's nothing to do. So to look at what that actually looks like, though, we're taking an example of the iPad News app. So seeing it on the Vision OS, on the Vision Pro, it's going to take the light mode version of that app. It'll take the iPad variant, although if you don't have an iPad variant, if it's only iPhone, it'll show that. And it'll take the landscape orientation. If you do have in the P list to say, no, only show portrait, then it will show portrait. On the top right, you have this little toggle to change it from landscape to portrait. So you can show it like this. And then on the bottom right, you have this little resizey thing, which resizes it. And this brings up a really good point. Now apps are completely resizable. So we have a lot of sizes now, right? From the iPhone SE to the 13-inch iPad Pro. But now we can make an app any size we want. We can make it as small as we want, or this app here, we could make huge, as big as that wall in the background, and then we could walk up next to it so we're 3 inches away from this big 10 or 12-foot app. And all of the text is going to scale automatically and it'll look great. The images, though, we need to make sure they're vector images, which is now the recommendation. No longer are we supposed to use any bitmap images. And I have a feeling they might just make that the general recommendation for all apps, whether or not they're visionOS, even for iPhone and iPad. You don't want images to scale up to 3 feet tall when it's a little bitmap image. It does by default. If you do use bitmaps, it uses the 2x variant. So if you're using Touch ID or Face ID, that'll automatically translate to Optic ID, just the internal camera scanners. If you're using gestures, how gestures work on visionOS is a tap is, if I can line up with my camera, it's a little touch with your thumb and 2 fingers. So you can only do 2 of those. If you have custom gestures with more than 2, then you need to rewrite those gestures or they just won't work. You can also use Bluetooth trackpads and keyboards and game controllers. Those will just work automatically without any changes. Okay, so that's if you do nothing. It just automatically comes over. And when we dig into the code, I'll show what that looks like. If you want to opt out, that's pretty easy as well. And again, we had this option when the M1 came out. And so we can look at just screenshots of that. If you go to App Store Connect, and then you go up to the top right where it lists your apps and you have that little plus button, right next to that, you can go iOS apps on Mac. It lists all your apps. I didn't want to list all 17 of mine, so I kind of trimmed it. You just check which ones you don't want, and then you hit done. They did show a screenshot of this from WWDC, and it shows iOS apps on XROS. They've since started calling that visionOS, but it's the same thing. You check them, and then you hit save. I do think this was just recently introduced into App Store, so you can actually go in there now and say if you don't want them in there. So that's it. Just 2 steps, and you can say, please don't show this in there. Okay, so now for the real fun. If you want to optimize your app and you want to say, let me try it out, let me see how it looks, and maybe even try out some of the new SDKs and kind of have some fun with it. The first thing to do is back in App Store Connect, you say, I want to add this platform and make it available as not just also this iPad app was found in the App Store, but this was targeted for this specifically. You just check visionOS. It'll be the same URL that you give out. People can still link to it. And as kind of a side benefit, if somebody does buy the Vision Pro and they already had your app installed on another device and they checked automatically download across devices, on day one, when they set up this new Vision Pro, your app will automatically be installed, which is kind of fun. Inside Xcode, and we'll go do this in a second, you add the platform destination of Apple Vision, and now you have 2 choices. You can install full Apple Vision using the new SDKs, or you can just say, I want to keep using the design for iPad variant, which allows you to run it in the simulator, allows you to publish it to the App Store, but it doesn't actually change the build target and it doesn't force you to change any code. So we'll look at what it looks like in the code. There are some trade-offs. Designing for visionOS, what they used to call XROS, gives you the access to all the new SDKs. It gives you the new look and feel. Designing for iPad, you're limited to just the light mode variant. You don't get any of the new SDKs. You can't do volume and immersive space, but you can continue using the old storyboards and all the things you're familiar with. Okay, so let's do a demo. I'll show the existing app. And like I said, it is very dog heavy. It's a very simple app. So it shows a list of dogs, and this is all pulling from the Pet Finder API. So these are all dogs that are available for adoption if you happen to be near me in Atlanta. If you're not, find a dog available near you for adoption. This is the iPhone version, but like I said, it's going to prefer iPad in this landscape orientation. And one thing I want to point out is when you're looking at this detail screen here, the whole background is white. So let's look at what that looks like on Vision. If we go into our Xcode app here, and then we go into the project settings, you can see we have our platform destinations, and it's currently running just on iPhone, iPad, and Mac. And those are what we have available for the simulator. So if we add Apple Vision, and we're to start with Design for iPad, now we have that available as a simulator target. So now we can run this, and it'll run on the simulator. And I'll make this a bit bigger. And if you're not familiar with the Vision Pro simulator, it shows us in this nice little kitchen, and we can walk around a bit. I'll zoom in. So it shows our iPad app, and it looks exactly the same. And you can see it has that same white background. Everything else works exactly the same. And how the simulator works is this cursor is where our eye would be looking when we were in the headset. And then a tap on the trackpad in the simulator would be the user doing that 3-finger touch. So it works great. And now we know when our app goes to the store, it'll look just like our iPad app, and it works fine. If we wanted to take it a step further and run this using the Reality Kit SDKs, it's going to warn us, hey, you sure you want to do this? I'm not going to change any code, but you are changing your build target. That's fine. So now when we run it, it'll go again. And now you'll notice the background here is no longer white. It's got this nice glass effect, and it looks a bit more at home. And you can see, if you look, we're in this kitchen and you can see the cabinet kind of appears behind. So on iPhone and iPad, we have this concept of light mode and dark mode. We don't have that concept on visionOS. We only have this glass effect. So if you pull over your iPad app and don't make changes, you just get light mode. You don't have an option of dark mode. And if you use the new Reality Kit SDKs, you use glass effect, and it does take into effect, it does take into consideration light. I don't know why we went so far away, but it's always the glass effect. It'll figure out for you just how light or dark that glass should be. You don't need to worry about that. So it's working now, but we've introduced some bugs. You can see when we hover over these now, these are navigation links, and it's decided navigation links should be round. So when we hover over them, the hover effect is round, even though we're using square images. And on this screen, this is a hover target, but it doesn't show any indication of that at all, which is one thing they point out now because this device isn't something you can touch. The user always needs to be able to know when there's something that they can tap on when they're looking at it. And we're not giving any guidance there at all. The user has no idea that this is something they can tap on because it doesn't apply that little shimmer effect. So this is the kind of thing that you need to know when you look at, is my app ready to be shown here using this new SDK? And in this one, no, we've introduced some bugs. So luckily, these are easy to fix. If we go into this main page here, these are, nope, this one here. These are our navigation links. So what they said is all default UI components will automatically have this hover effect. This one, we're adding custom components, so it's not getting that. So all we do is we just say we want to apply the hover effect, and that'll automatically give that little shimmer. For this one, though, we need to tell it that the content shape for the hover effect is going to be a rectangle. And then that'll make it so it doesn't have that circle in the background. And then I just know from trial and error that I need to tell it to make the button plain. So now when we run this and we go back to that main screen, it looks much better and the user can see that this is a tappable target. And then we have the same bug fix on that second screen. For that image, we apply the hover effect, and then once again, we say that the content shape, oops, this time for the hover effect is a circle. So now we go through and you can see it's letting the user know, hey, this thing you're looking at is something you can tap on. If we want to, we could also fix it here so they know they can tap on it to close it, and we could fix this little blur at the top, but we're not going to. You get the idea. So there's other SDKs you can use. One of the fun ones is one they call Ornament, which allows you to put little 3D hovering effects on the outside of the window. So we'll try one of those here. And this one, it's a bit more code, so I'm not going to type it all. I'll just go ahead and cheat and have it typed for me. So what we're doing is we're just adding a horizontal stack, and it doesn't really matter where we put it because we're just adding onto that an ornament. And since the ornament is outside of the window, it doesn't matter where in the window we put it. And then inside of that ornament, we're adding everything that's in that toolbar at the top of our window, which is just that toggle and then that search text field. So let me show you what that looks like. It's this thing here at the bottom. We've got the saved toggle and then the search box. And it's hard to see in the simulator. Let me get rid of the keyboard, sorry. Maybe not. It's hard to see in the simulator, but this is floating a little above the window. It's not actually part of the window. So it gives it kind of a cool 3D effect and makes it look more than just a flat iPad window. But what's fun is now that we have this ornament with our toolbar items, we don't need the toolbar at the top at all. So we can go in here and go down to our toolbar. Oops, sorry. Go back down to our toolbar. And we can just say, hey, only show these toolbar items if you're running on an iPad. Don't bother showing them if you're running on the visionOS. And now we get a nice clean look, giving us all this real estate just for the pictures, and then we have the toolbar items kept separate, floating above the UI, which gives it a nice clean look. Okay, but now we've introduced a bug, because now if I switch back and try to run it again on the iPad, we're going to get an error. And it's going to say, hey, I don't know this glass background. And the glass background we're adding on top of ornament. Ornament by default doesn't have any background of its own. You're left to yourself to just give any background you want to ornament. And for this one, we've said just give it that normal glassy background effect. So what it's saying is now that we've switched back to the iPad build target, it's never heard of glass background. And oddly enough here, ornament is a non-op. Running it on iPad just doesn't do anything. And for some reason, glass background effect is not a non-op. I don't know why they did these two separately. Um, and hopefully they'll fix that at some point because it makes it really odd. And to make it even weirder, we can't do this here and check if the device is visionOS because that's not even an option. You, oh, you know what? I'm sorry, they did add that. Okay, but um, it we can't just leave this in here while we're running an iPad. So the only fix we have is just to do a full-on debug level check and say if the OS is visionOS, and then just completely leave this out. So now running on iPad, that's just completely ignored. So now on visionOS, we get it. Oh, sorry, I gotta switch back. I was in the walking mode. So now on iPad, we get it with the toolbar. On Vision, we get it without the toolbar with the ornament, and we're doing the debug check. And anytime you're using SDKs on one that aren't in the other, you're gonna have to do these kind of checks, which is why we got that warning when we added the build target at the beginning, and it said, hey, this may change some things even though I'm not changing code. So let me switch back to the PowerPoint. This brings up a feature or a point that there may be unavailable features on visionOS, just like that feature, glass effect, wasn't available on iPad. So some of them that aren't available at all on Vision are core motion services, barometer and magnometer, any location services except standard, although the documentation does say that you can get fine location when paired with an iPhone, but I couldn't find anywhere where it actually talks about how to do that. Health kit data is completely unavailable. Video and photo capture is unavailable, but I'll go in a bit and talk about how that actually plays out. A lot of things just behave differently. And they behave differently in a way that your code shouldn't crash if you just try to use them like you used to. For example, screen time. If your app currently reports screen time, then currently on iPad you report, hey, my app was used for this long, and it goes into reporting. On Vision OS, if you report screen time, then the call will come back and say, great, got it, thank you. But it won't actually record it. It just doesn't do anything. On haptics, if you make the call and say, hey, vibrate, it's not going to. Instead, it makes a sound because the headset doesn't vibrate. It would probably feel really awful if it did. Um, Safari behaves a bit differently. I'll show a demo on that in just a second. Apple Watch features, if you have a feature that would install a bit to an Apple Watch, you can't do that from visionOS. You have to do it from the iPhone, iPad side. So definitely check the documentation for anything here that you use. And some of the features like camera, I'll show in a bit, have additional features they've added to check and see if features have been changed that you can use before you use them. Okay, so back to the demo. Let me change and add a tab to our app. And then we can go through some other features and kind of show some of these things that have changed. So we've got these tabs at the bottom now with some tests. And I'll start with photo. And as you probably know, if we try to take a photo on the iPad, it's not actually going to show anything. But if we were on a physical device and not the simulator, there'd be a nice little camera here, right? If we do open Safari, then it shows Improving Science website, and it's here in the app. Like, we can't show these separately. Once we leave the app, it's still there in the browser. That's just normal operating thing. And if we do an sign in, everything stays within the app. This is just normal modal things, right? All of that changes on visionOS. Modal windows are no longer modal. So here I've done sign in with Apple. It's signed in and then give me the little tokeny thing afterwards. If we switch back to Vision, and we do those same demos, I'll start with, well, first the tab. It's kind of cool. It does this as an ornament. And remember, the cursor is where the user is looking. So once they glance at the tabs, it expands out. And then when they touch, it switches over, which I think is such a great effect. So starting with photos, it allows you to choose the photo library or camera. And if you choose camera, the SDKs do show that the device has front and rear cameras because it does. It has tons of them. But if you choose either, it just shows you a black square because you're not actually able to use either. None of the cameras are actually available to be used. It won't crash your app if you try to use them. It'll just show black. So you should check if you're on the visionOS and if the camera is not actually present, but if the camera is available is the new call. So that's one change. A bigger change is modal windows. Modal windows are no longer modal. So if we do that same demo from before and we open Safari, this is now a completely separate app. And it's running at the same time as our app, even though I've asked for it to be modal. It's going to be a huge change for apps that have sign-up wizards, where you have one screen and it says, "Hey, grant me permissions to locations," and then you go on to the next screen, or it says "Log in." You really see that with the sign in with Apple here before. With the iPad version, we were completely locked in to finish signing in. We couldn't go back here. Here, I can continue doing anything I want in the app. I can open Safari again. I can cancel out. I can go back. But what's crazy is at any point I can go back here and finish signing in. And in this version, I still get that token. But depending on how the app's written, I might have left this screen at some point. It really depends on how your app's written, and I think a lot of apps are written in that part where the first run or when you first log in, it expects you to be stuck on that page waiting for that model to finish. A lot of times, we pop up a modal and it's expecting the user to answer yes or no. It's not expecting an option to be the user just didn't do anything with the modal and pushed it off to the side. So I'm hoping that at the very least, I've convinced you to try out your app and run it on the simulator and just see how it went. Even if I haven't convinced you to try adding the reality SDKs and improving it. Apple has a program where if you do try it out and you see how it's going and you want to run it on the hardware, you can send it to them at this URL and they will run it on an actual Vision Pro, see how it goes, and then they will send you back a report with screenshots or crash logs and let you know, how did your app work? Did it work well? If you want to go further than that and you live near one of these cities or you're willing to travel to one of these cities, then you can take your MacBook and your app and you can run it on them. And they'll sit down with you, they'll pair you with one of their developers, I'm assuming. Um, and you can try out your app, spend an afternoon seeing how your app runs. It doesn't have to be a game, it can just be your iPad app that you want to see how does it run on this Vision Pro, which is kind of a cool system they have as long as you're near one of these cities. And they did just add New York and Sydney, so they are adding more cities as they go. Um, and of course, you can always just wait early next year and buy a Vision Pro. So that's it. Here's my contact info again. Um, Feel free to hit me up.
That sounds fantastic, Brad. Amazing presentation. I can see now what you said about dogs. It was such a beautiful example. Yeah, thank you so much. We are hearing here from Bruno Alves, who is saying great information, Brad. I hope they expand the series soon. So people is getting super excited. I guess that you are also in that leadership position that you are sharing your knowledge. You can follow Brad, of course, on LinkedIn as well to continue learning from him. I do have a question for you,
Sure.
and is yeah, what are your maybe challenges that you anticipate for this transfer of apps to the Vision OS, other than the ones that you mentioned? That people will have to make their own optimizations. Is there any other things that maybe people have to consider?
Mm, that's a good question. I think one of the big challenges will be how do we get it's pretty easy to get the apps up and running. One of the demos they showed is taking the app and then adding on 3D content. And it's actually pretty easy to add just 3D elements that kind of float above the window and even on the side of it. So I think one of the challenges is going to be, how do we do that and when? At what point is it needed to add 3D elements and when is it just we're doing it because it's fun? I think, 15 years ago when the iPad came out, uh, we really didn't quite know what it could do yet and it ended up doing quite a bit. So I think the Vision Pro is going to come out and this first version will mainly be for developers, but as the new versions come out that actually are for consumers, we're going to have to see like how do we adapt our apps and how do we change the UI so that we're not just taking what we have and then just saying, okay, now it runs there, great.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a great opportunity to explore a lot with all of these capabilities, gesture, especially all the stuff that is about gesture and contextual awareness that the Vision Pro is bringing. I wonder For those ones who are not very familiar, but they would like to create an app from scratch, how do you see that? Is it very difficult if someone hasn't been familiar with React, Native, or this type of programming skills?
No, this is such a great time to get into it. I mean, when it first started with Objective-C, and that was your only
Mhm.
option, it was so hard. But now with SwiftUI, it's honestly a lot of fun. And the session before this one, where it was JavaScript and you had frameworks like A-Frame and all that, I mean, it's really getting to the point where it's so much easier and it's just so much fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think, yeah, of course, things are evolving. There is also the capability of using Unity to creating these apps as well. What are your thoughts about this? Now that you are showing us one side, what are your thoughts about the other side of using Unity?
Yeah, yeah, I am a fan of Unity. It's a completely different world, I think, from, these typically when I'm making apps for clients, it's, business apps and we're doing Maui or React Native. Um, I have started working in Unity, but it's a completely different experience. I like Swift UI and I really like the stuff they did, but it's going to be interesting to see how many people pick that up versus Unity because Unity, you get not just Vision Pro, but all the other headsets as well. Swift UI is fun to work with, but you really are limited to the one headset.
Mhm. Yeah, and my other question is that if the capabilities of things that you can create in the Vision OS are the same in Unity than using their own native language, or what is the easiest one there?
If well, it's hard to tell so far because the Unity frameworks for Vision Pro haven't been completely released. There's still a beta sign up. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah, hopefully we are not having to create multiple projects for multiple headsets, or I think adoption's not going to take up too quickly.
yeah, for those ones that are building an experience and they want to deploy it to different headsets, that would be a little bit of a second thought.
Yeah, that's
But
a hard
it is
sell.
very interesting. I think that I was very glad when I heard that Apple did this connection with Unity so that
Mhm.
people can also explore right away those 3D capabilities from Unity to
Yeah,
deliver these apps.
yeah.
So, is there anything else that you wish somebody had asked you today?
No, I
The
don't
hard
think so.
question.
No.
Mhm. Besides the question so far.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's been an amazing presentation, of course. Is there any other place where you could continue sharing this type of talks? Is there any place where you feel that people could reach out to you other than your email to take a look at your expertise?
Yeah, the email or also our Discord. I'll be there
Oh,
as well.
oh yeah, in the
The
channel.
Global XR Discord, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Brad, for your amazing presentation. I think that it was very clear on how to optimize. There are many things that I didn't know, so I feel very, very happy to get to know them from you and everyone else. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bruno, for your comments and everyone watching. See you in the next session then.
All right.
Have
Thank you
an
so much.
amazing rest of the day and week. Bye for
Okay.
now.
Bye.